thank you all so much for having me, but really I want to thank you for being the Decorative Arts Trust. I'm a member, and the digital programming is wonderful. I love it, and I can't thank you enough for being the support group that provides that. So, Meissen, 1709, the first European true porcelain, and what that is a whole other issue. 1709, Augustus II, the Elector of Saxony, who also became King of Poland, was the driving force. A young man named Johann Friedrich Böttger was the key figure for both the technology and the initial push for artistic excellence, not just to solve the technical problems of making porcelain, but to make sure that it was artistically outstanding. Then in 1720, a new figure came in, Johann Gregorius Herold, as the new artistic director, who pushed another technological and artistic transformation. The name Meissen comes in because Augustus moved production from his capital to Dresden to a huge old fortress upriver in the town of Meissen for two reasons. Number one, to keep to keep the intellectual property, namely Böttger, safely locked up, and number two, to keep the industrial espionage out, which worked sort of okay for a while. Malcolm Gutter. Malcolm discovered decorative arts in general in his early travels, and he glommed onto porcelain because of a visit to Dresden and the great historic porcelain collection there. His collection was one of the extraordinary private collections of our time. It was not huge. It was not spectacular in terms of, although it had some very charismatic objects, that was not the point. He made what is probably the best private collection of the formative years of Meissen, which is what he really loved and what I'll be talking about here. When he decided to bequeath the collection to the fine arts museums, he lent about 100 pieces to an exhibition in 2014 to 16. And the museum published a catalog. Oh, I'm supposed to advance these things. Let's go to here's my title page, all right? I already talked through that. Here's Malcolm, and here's his catalog. The catalog is going to be interesting for many of you, not just because of the Meissen content, but it's really a sort of landmark in the study of collecting and how collection works. There is an introduction by one of the great auction house experts on the 20th century collecting of Meissen porcelain. The catalog has gorgeous photographs and essays on about 75 selected pieces. And in addition to that, it has astonishingly candid essays by Malcolm about many of those pieces, explaining why he chose them, how he got them, and even sometimes how much he paid. Malcolm was certainly comfortable financially, but he was not rich. So, well, he often told me that collecting Meissen is not for sissies. He had to learn the whole field. He learned the specialist dealers. He learned the auction houses. He learned what was in which private collection and when it might come up for sale. You know, you watch the death notices. That's how these things work. He started out hunting for bargains, but also sometimes paying market price. And toward the end, he went absolutely all out. Like so many of us who collect, he started out before he knew anything, and the results were predictable. But he was tremendously smart, very curious, and intellectually disciplined. And he very quickly identified mainstream iconic pieces to collect, such as these three plates from the most distinguished royal services of the early 1730s, the one on the left from the coronation service of Augustus III, first guy's son, and a big plate from one of the two main services reserved for royal use, also from 1730 on. And then that plate from the first great diplomatic gift to Russia, a service that was made for Empress Elizabeth of Russia. About 20 years after that, he also managed to get a plate from the Swan service, which I'm not going to give you the history on now. I want to focus on Michael's collection. Malcolm's collection. Big service. There are a lot of plates out there. And like many large issue productions, they vary in quality. Some of them come from very fresh molds. Some of them, the molds were a little worn. Some of them, the painting is a little finer. Some of them, it's a little lower grade. This plate is the smallest size, but the detailing is exceptionally fine. That's the kind of distinction that Malcolm could make. And then 12 years after that, he added a pair of candlesticks from the service, which are quite rare. But actually, by that time, he bought them because they were Swan service. And he was great friends with the dealer. And so they fit here. But by the time he got those candlesticks, just after the year 2000, he had already stopped buying later Meissen, that is, things after about 1735. He knew the material cold, but he just wasn't drawn to collect it anymore because he really saw it as too easy. They had all the technology down by that time. And what really pulled him in was the open questions, historically, about the very difficult period of bringing Meissen up from nothing into a major decorative art form. Let me do it this way. I'm not going to try to survey the whole collection. What I'm going to do is show you the essential collecting categories that Malcolm used to structure the collection. There's a time span of a little over 20 years, from 1709 to roughly 1730, with a little leeway at the end. And there's a break at about 1720. In the period before 1720, there are three subcategories that have to do with the technology of making the material. 1720, the new art director comes in, Herold, at just about the same time that the technical director at the factory figures out a new porcelain formula that allows fusion of enamel colors much more successfully. And Herold pushed within 10 years or so to develop about 16 new enamel colors that could take the high temperature firing. So that's a separate area. The catalog breaks that down further by subject matter, by chinoiserie as one main subject area, European painting as another subject area, and sort of knockoffs of East Asian patterns like Kakiemon or Famille Verte. And Malcolm did consider that, but the technology was really fundamental. So I'm not going to break down those different subject areas. These three figures show the three main types of early ceramic at Meissen. In 1709, having had input from a really extraordinary group of experts in Saxony, in Dresden, developed at the same time two new formulas. One was a dark stoneware, the other was the white porcelain. It took 4 more years of tweaking before the white porcelain could be issued in commercial quantities, at which point they dropped making the red stoneware because there was so much more demand for the white stuff. So the very earliest development of both technology and design issues was exclusively in the red stoneware. Then came the white porcelain, and in about 1715, the factory began to work with a goldsmith in Dresden named Funke, who started experimenting with enamel colors. And there's a very limited amount of that stuff out there, but intellectually, thematically, it's very, very important, although very difficult to collect. So I'm going to show you each of those three topics. Oh, you're watching me on time. Did you go out and buy an air horn so that you can stop me? I want to go on a tangent about this subject matter because this figure is an iconic model from the early Meissen factory. It was produced in huge numbers in the white porcelain. They're still around. In the 1720s, when the factory developed the enamels, they simplified the modeling because they were going to color it anyway. Malcolm did incredibly well in 1975 to choose a really finely detailed example from the early period. And then just in time for the catalog, he bought these two others that are much rarer, much more expensive. And yet, today they're hard to exhibit because out of context, on the face of it, they are horrifically racist. But that's not how they were seen originally. They don't fit into a racial category for people of the early 18th century. The category that they fit in then was the grotesque. Dwarves were horribly represented, as you know, in the 17th and 18th century. Catholics and Protestants made grotesque caricatures of each other. Everybody in the middle and upper classes loved grotesque representations of peasants. It was very coarse humor. And I'll show you the more general chinoiserie category later on. Oh, there it is. Okay. Three of the developmental stages of the red stoneware. It's fired at a very high temperature. It's extremely tough. It actually vitrifies, it fuses. You can put hot water into a vessel and it won't crack, that kind of thing. Both the colors, the base red color and that gray color on the right that the Meissen people called Meissen Porcelain, iron porcelain. Both colors are tributes to Chinese Yixing stoneware, which was imported into Europe into large quantities. And that also, as we'll see, provides models for some of the forms. But Butker was very insistent that this stuff was better than the Chinese originals because it was actually tougher and finer, and you could do more things with it. And there are four basic types. The iron porcelain, the basic red matte color. You could put on a very thin dilute clay called slip of a different color. And the stuff was so intensely resistant that you could actually grind it and polish it the way people in Dresden, with their great mineral wealth and wide range of mineral resources, had a tradition of grinding and polishing semi-precious hard stones, and also polishing and engraving glass, which was another big industry in Dresden. Some of the models did come directly from Yixing. And in fact, Malcolm's collection includes another subcategory that I'm not going to talk about. It includes 39 Chinese and Japanese ceramics that were prototypes for Meissen designs. And 13 of them come from the quote-unquote Japanese palace that Augustus II built to house his collection of 25,000 plus Chinese and Japanese porcelains and stonewares, and eventually his range of Meissen porcelains, including, including this piece, and on some of these things, I've included the Japanese palace inventory numbers, which were ground into the bottoms of these pieces in about 1732. You know, it's a mark of authenticity and historical importance. At one level, this is a direct copy of a Yixing prototype. At another level, I don't know why they did this, they did a sort of light polish to the surface so that the detailing has actually been diminished. I don't know the point of that, but it went into the Elector King's collection, so it must have been okay at the time. This is a more complicated design issue. One of the things that Butker insisted on was having real artists design models from the very beginning. And they got hold of a Dresden goldsmith and court sculptor, court jeweler named Irminger to do many of the early models. And it was a really, really good choice. So I'm showing you that coffee pot, which is, again, it's an enormously widely produced and distributed model in the stoneware, not later on in the porcelain. Because it's actually kind of a problem historically in defining its relationship to models. I've put it up next to these wonderful Japanese square flasks that I photographed at the Gardner Museum in Toronto, where I'm sure many of you have been, late 17th century. We know that Meissen had them because there are direct copies of that shape in the very early issues of the porcelain from the mid-1750s, mid-17 teens onward. The coffee pot, though, is very, very strange. The spout and its strut are copied from two separate sources in Chinese and Japanese porcelain. The handle is probably Irminger's own personal invention, widely used in early Meissen. And then in the Meissen literature, the shape of that pot is credited to European sources in silver. You know, I know zero about silver. Many of you probably do know silver really well, and I'd like to hear from you. So, for example, on the V&A website, on their examples of this shape, which was issued in so many different kinds of decoration and treatment, they say, well, it combines East Asian models with European models such as Huguenot silver. And I tried to find Huguenot silver that looked like this, and I couldn't. I think what's going on here is that from the very early days, Irminger as a modeler and Butker as the sort of supervisor, impresario, were pushing to go beyond just copying direct sources, which they did in some cases. But to be able to go beyond that, and I think a coffee pot like this is already very early in the factory's history, not just a pastiche, but a really new artistic concept. And then, whoops, here we are. Malcolm wanted to be able to show these things playing off against each other so that you could see the iron porcelain, semi-polished coffee pot, brilliantly polished bowl and cover, and getting the cover to fit the bowl through firing was a technological achievement in itself. And this, I took most of these photographs in the installation in 2014 to 15. And this is what Malcolm wanted you to see, was how these things play off against each other. But of course, he also wanted things that were spectacular just in and of themselves. The shape of that tankard is an absolutely ordinary German standard tankard shape, the Walzenkrug, cylindrical shape with a simple handle. But to be able to do that with the colors of this high-fired ceramic body was extraordinary. I put in the label the name Meissen Porcelain, Jasper porcelain, which is what Butker called all of this stoneware because it was sort of like reddish color, like jasper, and it could be decorated, carved, polished like the Dresden jewelers did with jasper stone. Nowadays, it's used pretty much exclusively for this marbled effect, which is very, very rare. I don't remember the exact number. I think there are 12 other tankards like this anywhere. And then this wonderful little teapot invented by Erminger. Yixing teapots from the 17th century, there's a sort of gradation of shapes from the simple globular teapot going up through pear-shaped, as they're called, a little taller, narrow in proportion. This is like that, but not like any of them. And on the basic Chinese shape, you get a very European Renaissance Baroque shouting mask under the spout. You get these textile shapes of the flaps and the tassels that are almost architectural, and then really architectural moldings above and below the rim, and then the dome cover, like a ribbed architectural dome, enhanced further by very thin dark slip that sets off the shaping and detailing. This also just made it into the catalog. Malcolm really stretched to buy this late in life to get this range of a very, very rare material that's tremendously sought after. Now the white porcelain. These two single-handed beakers are ungainly, if not downright ugly. The photograph doesn't show you that they are in fact misshapen and not really perfectly circular in section. The close-up photograph, I'm not sure how much comes across on the slide projection, but there are discolorations, little black grains through here, a crack there. These were really experimental, and they must have sat around the factory for a few years. And then just to get rid of them, they got sent off to the Funke workshop in Dresden for gilding to make them at least saleable somehow. And now even that gilding is worn out. So why would you want to put something like this on view? The answer is that if you're trying to show how a small group of people went from zero to the sound barrier in less than 20 years, it's wonderful to be able to show where they started. And only 3 other museums, all in Germany, have these things. And it was very quick. Once the white porcelain really got into production in 1714, really quick to build up the capacity of turning out beautiful white porcelain with white decoration for its own sake. So these applied roses, you roll a little bit of clay in your hands to make the stems. The different leaf shapes are pressed into molds, but then you work them by hand to get them to look like real leaves, and you even incise little vein-like effects on them. And the rose petals are modeled by hand, leaf by leaf. And the factory term for this kind of thing was Irminger overlay, meaning that this very important goldsmith modeler had a lot to do with the idea, though Butker was pushing for the technical purity of the white, as well as to have good design. As these things left the factory, many buyers had them decorated by their local workshops with whatever colors people could find to go on them. Whoever owned this appreciated and recognized the white. And the pure white, undecorated, 17 teams porcelain in Butker's body is a great treasure to find, especially in a relatively large size and in good condition like this. And even more sculptural, this wonderful exotic teapot shape, which is recorded in the factory records in 1722 as a Wassermann, a waterman. The model itself has a basis in European design traditions of really fantastic grotesque shapes for both silverware and hardstone cutting, like cut crystal in Milan and other places, going back to the late 16th centuries. And then further propagated through engraved designs. This is not a copy of any of those things. It is a really original design at the factory, not recorded as by Erminger, but by someone really good. And in the 1720s, again, with a new body and a better capacity for coloring, a lot of the detail was simplified because you were going to enamel it anyway. This one is a wonderful display of the techniques at the factory. You can see how the clay body was put together. You can see how the detailing was hand finished. This is a place where Malcolm compromised. The cover is a modern replacement. He was willing to say, I got to have one of these things. It has to be a good early one. And I'll just have a color cover made. And if you're wondering why the same object shows up in two different colors, it's because partway through the exhibition, I bought a better camera. And that's the photograph on the right. Funke's enamels. They can do very beautiful decoration. But you can see in the close-up, come on, what's happening here? Whoops. Rebooting, is that what's happening?
But you happen to be over your time.
I'm over time. I didn't see the 5 minutes. We didn't get to everything, but that's good because we had a good look at what we did see. And I'm very grateful to have been with you, and I look forward to seeing you again.